Okay. How about now, guys? You guys can probably hear me. And you know what? That's because my mic just cut out. So, okay, so we should be good now. Okay. No sound, no sound, no wound. Okay. Everybody, how's it going now? Can you hear me? Jim, can you hear me? Can you give me a thumbs up? Jim can hear me. I think you guys can hear me. Let me do a sound check. I mean, this wouldn't be a live webinar without some kind of audio technical issue, right? So let me just do a double check. All right, looks like we might have fixed it. All right, give me 1 second, everybody. There we go. We're fixed. We are good to go. So unfortunately, you guys missed this amazing introduction that I just gave because I was I was muted. But you know what? This is why I love this audience, because not only were you guys immediately commenting, I got like 10 text messages from people. Some of which I have no idea how the hell you have my cell phone number, but that's impressive. It shows that you guys are using the program. Damn, very good. So as I was saying, this is our very first live webinar for the Medical Sales Network Effects program. I wanted to bring you guys thought leaders from the sales and marketing world, people who have deep commercial experience. One of those is Jim Surik. Jim has been at over 5 different M&A, which are merger and acquisition exits. He served as a executive leader at companies like Boston Scientific and Medtronic post-acquisition. I just want to make that clear. He's a startup guy just like me. And so now that you guys can hear me, please drop in the comments where you're joining in from. We already got some legendary people already watching in the audience. Ken Husted, thank you, Ken, for joining. He's another person. Ken actually just did an episode with me on the podcast a couple weeks ago. His episode is going to be releasing next week. Can't wait to release that one. That's going to be one of the few capital sales process podcasts you're going to hear about. So while you guys drop in the comments where you're joining in from, let me bring on my good friend and special guest, Jim Surik. Jim, how's it going?
Hey, Omar. It's going great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, I appreciate you putting up with that audio issue earlier, because I realized I'm like, what's Jim waving his arms for?
Yeah,
It's
I'm
like,
like,
yeah.
but but I have to, like you, I have to tell you, I love the fact that people have your cell phone. You have no idea how they
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, no, seriously. And there's like 3 or 4 people in our program. Like the first question that went through my mind, it's like, hey, it's so and so. I can't hear you. And I was like, how the hell did they get my cell phone? And I was like, well, of course, I teach a program on how to get access to people, so of course they're doing it. So let's see who else is going. So I mentioned Ken Husted joining in from San Antonio, Kevin Pullman from New Jersey. Hey, Kevin, thanks for joining the show. Brian Weigand from the Chicago area. Joe Canepa, another member from Oakland, California. Fantastic. So, Jim, before we kind of jump into today's topic, maybe you can give like a little bit of backstory on yourself and like your history.
Sure.
How'd you get started in this great industry?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I I went out to get my master's in international management at Thunderbird, and when I was coming out of it, I had a good friend of mine, Tim Stacy, who was working in the med device business in Chicago, and everyone at that point, because it was the early '90s, was getting laid off. So you had Hatchett, Jack Welch from GE. You had all this stuff that was going on. The only place in the world that wasn't being impacted by the financial downturn was the med device healthcare industry. And so when I got out, I talked to my buddy Tim. He set me up some interviews, and we got into it. And I started off selling for a company called General Medical, which was basic supplies for doctors' offices. So table paper, toilet paper, syringes, cotton balls. And I was the worst sales rep they've ever hired because I literally had no idea, but it what I was doing. And I was always asking people, and this will come out through my years, going, why would somebody buy table paper from me versus who they're already getting it from? It's table paper, it's a commodity. I don't get it. And then there was this guy, he still works there. I think McKesson bought him. His name's Paul Kramer, and I sat down with Paul. He was, a top-notch rep. He's a very quiet guy. unassuming, but he was killing it. And I sat down with him and I said, you know, Paul, how is it that you continue to grow selling table paper? You know, it's like I am the worst sales rep in the world. I cannot figure this out. And after we talked, he said, "Oh, you're under the misassumption that you're selling medical supplies." And I go, I have a book 4 inches thick that says I'm selling medical supplies. He goes, no, you're selling transportation and distribution services. And that changed my entire perspective on what value based selling is, because he was going to customers asking what would be the most effective way for them to take, deliver, and pay for something, regardless of what it was. And then he created a business model around that. And so that was when I started to understand it. Then I went to spine for a company called Danik and became sophomore Danik, which became Medtronic Spine and Biologics. I started off there as a 1099 rep, 100% commission, and left as the VP of Sales and Development 10 years later. Then, so that was the startup. And it was really interesting for people that, we're going to talk about startups. When I was going through that process of interviewing, I was actually interviewing with a Zimmer distributor and Danik at the time. And everyone was telling me that I should go down the road of working for Zimmer because spinal implants at the time was a dirty word, because pedicle screws are off label. You couldn't say pedicle. You could say, sacroiliac screws, but that was it. And so everyone's telling me, hey, go right into Zimmer because this spine thing isn't going to work out. And I go, everyone's telling me to go right. I'm going to go left, you know? And I just went into spine because nobody wanted to go, right? It was this unknown and people were afraid of it. And it's like, I'm going to try it. And so it obviously worked out. And then I went to Advanced Bionic. That was a pain management company and zero market share, first one in sales, built the organization to about 300 people, 200 million in revenue in about 3.5 years in Boston, bought it for about $3 billion. Went to the
Nice.
cochlear implant company for Advanced Bionics. Al Mann's, people might not know who Al Mann was, but he was a prolific entrepreneur in the day. He built MiniMed, Pace Setters, which was his first company, which was the foundation of St. Jude's cardiac pacing business. Um, and a bunch of companies. Well, they had the cochlear company asked me to come and help turn it around. We did. We sold it off to Sonova for about $500 million. Was recruited over to Intellis, turnaround. Ended up being there for about 7-8 years and sold it to Stryker for about $700 million. And then just recently at GHX in digital healthcare, was Explorer Surgical. GHX bought us, and it's just kind of one of those things that just continues to roll. You meet people, you engage, they look for some expertise in some of these areas, and you just keep rolling. So,
Fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly the reason why I wanted to have you on, because I feel like, after, after your first acquisition, like, you pay attention to a few things that happen. The second one happens, you start to notice some patterns, right? But it's kind of rare, at least in my experience, where somebody's been through more than even two, right?
Sure.
You've been through five,
Yeah.
right? So, I want to cover some ground with you on that. But, and again, for those who are watching, by the way, some quick shout outs as always. We got Reed Kelly coming in from Houston. We got Fernando, my buddy Fernando, over in San Francisco. We have a LinkedIn user. I can't see their name because for this person who said T-Bird on LinkedIn, you're actually, I think I might be able to see it somewhere else. Your profile is private, so I can't see it, but that's okay. We appreciate that shout out. So Jim, because this kind of goes hand in hand with commercial, right? Like, what does it take to have a commercial exit like that? It also means, like, how do you evaluate these companies? So because a lot of people are going to Q4, they're evaluating new companies, whether from an investor side or even from a employment side. So let's start with the first one, which is what it actually means to go to a startup, right? Like, what do you look for?
Yeah. So what I'm looking for are really simple. Is that how many competitors are there? Because if you have more than five, you're going probably into a commodity market. And unless that product is really distinguishing itself, and what I mean by that, and I've written about it, I talk about it, is clinical, financial, and strategic value for the doctor, the patient, the practice, and the healthcare system. You have to answer those questions for those products. And if you can't, then you don't have a product that's going to be successful. You may erode market share and you're going to burn through a lot of cash and, can exist for a while until somebody acquires you for, one time, two times earnings. But um, it's really about the competition. And then it is about the technology. So with the companies that I went to, all of them, um, the technologies were superior to everyone else's, right? And had an opportunity where value wasn't being realized. And Telus was one of those companies that
Hmm.
the way and the approach in which things were being done were not going to get the company to move forward. And so it's competitors and the technology better be cool. I told you before we got on this, I'm not going to sell a pedicle screw, right? I mean, there's 600 pedicle screw companies, out there. I mean, I can't even imagine what it would be like to try to break into the spine business now with that kind of competition. And that goes for hips and knees. I mean, a lot of good companies out there with some really good technology, but struggling to break in. And the other one is team, and
Hmm.
it's who's running the company and what's the attitude. And it really starts at the top. And what I look for are learners, like people who are willing to learn. And that doesn't mean I have the answers, but are you willing to? And how do you assess that? Are you willing to admit that you might not know something? Are you willing to admit that there's are areas in which your expertise isn't great, so I need to find somebody? So when you get somebody like that as a leader of a company, you're going to create a learning organization. Learning organizations flourish. Control from the top down, like Black Hawk Down, in which the army is telling them to go left or right, and they're getting killed because they're not listening to the people on the front lines. Unlike the Marines, who they're making all the decisions from the ground floor, they're going forward. Nobody in the eagle eye is telling them where to go. And so, if you have a leadership that is going to relinquish that to an extent to go figure it out, you're going to have a better shot because you're going to run faster and you're going to pivot fast. So,
Now, I think that's really good advice as well. I think that people, especially in their evaluation of a company, don't ask the questions to uncover that. For me, I learned this the hard way, fortunately, earlier on in my career. And I think it just as a simple example, just in interviews when you talk to leadership, you can ask certain questions that uncover things. And the one, and Jim, I'm wondering from your experience if this is a red flag for you. The one red flag for me is when, if I ask questions and the answers I'm being given are very definite, like they are so sure about it, it like doesn't matter. And there's one particular company many years ago that I was very interested in working for, but the commercial leader that I interviewed with was so certain about something, it just really bugged me. And I was like,
mhm.
well, if that guy, and I knew he was wrong, by the way, because it was something that was marketing related. I was like, if he's that confident about that, and this is an interview, I was like, what's this guy going to be like when I work for him? Would
Right.
you agree with that?
That you listen 1,000% because you're not a learner then. And then what I take from that is a very high ego because I'm not going to listen to people who are underneath me. I'm the title. I'm going to drive this and I have all the answers. Now it's really funny because there's a gal that I worked with at Osprey, and her name's Rachel Armstrong. And after about 3 months, she goes, "I know what you're doing," and she's incredibly bright. She's going to be a superstar in this industry. And I said, "What? What am I doing?" She goes, "You're surrounding yourself with people who've succeeded in this company. You're trying to figure out how and why." And I go, "Yeah, because I have no idea." Right? I have no idea what we really should be doing. So I'm going to go ask the people that actually are succeeding, right? And find out what they're doing. And then I'm going to surround myself with them, right? And so I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I'm going to find somebody who's smarter, right? And, and really what comes out of that then leadership from that past period, those people move on to greater things because they've been given the opportunity to grow and flourish in an environment that encourages dissent, right? Disagreement, right? On anything, but then align when it's time to align to move forward as a team. Guys like Tom Williamson, who's running chief commercial officer over at BioTissue. I mean, he's an engineer by trade, got into sales, and he's very analytical. Remains very calm. I'm very emotional. I'm out there, and I hired this guy. Going, he's nothing like me, and he's going to be such a great asset to this team, right? Because I can turn to him for a different perspective. So if you're going through that interview and you're finding that where it's like I have all the answers, I can guarantee you they don't. And if they're not, and I would rather have somebody go, you know what, we really don't know yet. Perfect. Then we'll find out together.
Yeah, and I like the way you put that, and I think that you know, again, whether it's an investment standpoint, so again, like for those who are interested, I'm doing an investor live stream tomorrow with a robotics company, a robotic eyelash company, believe it or not, which is really fascinating. But from an investor standpoint or from an employee standpoint, really evaluating, is it a learner company? Because again, you tell me, you and I are good enough friends, or you can say, hey, Omar, I disagree with this. But like one of those things that sort of tipped me off, and I had a discussion about this actually with one of the viewers, Ken Houston, who's going to be on the show next week, is that I think that the old model in MedTech is, let's hire somebody who's been in this specific specialty, like spine or cardiac, for 10, 15, 20 years, which made sense as a business model, let's say a decade ago, when hospital access was a lot easier. The deal complication was, the deals weren't as complicated. So it's like, okay, they got the Rolodex. They know who to talk to. They knew the KOLs. Let's just go with that. Nowadays, it's not the same way. And I feel like when you find people like that who have been in an industry for over 10, 20, 30 years, they've really gotten focused on their way of thinking. And so they don't challenge their own mode of thinking. And I almost feel like it's better to hire people who come from the MedTech background, but might be, coming from a different specialty. Like, in my opinion, I credit some of your success in the fact that you've gone from completely different specialties and technologies to something completely new. So as a result, you've had to work harder because you had to figure out things from the ground up and go in with no assumptions.
Right. No, that's absolutely right. And that's the problem that I agree with you, is that I call it hiring at the Rolodex. I'm going to hire the VP of sales Rolodex or the VP of marketing Rolodex. They're going to bring their people in, and then they're going to duplicate the success we had over there. That just doesn't happen, and it doesn't work. And that's just like hiring. I'm going to hire competitive reps. I've gone through that. It never works out. I've never had it work out one time. And there's a variety of reasons why, but and we could get into that at another time, but that has to do with doctor relationships and their loyalty to companies and products versus people, and how complicated that can get. But the idea is, I'm always going to hire a spine guy. Well, then you're just going to keep following the same pattern for the last 30 years.
Including
right?
what your competitors are doing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and I think a lot of times, like, I hate to say this, I love this industry and I came back to it for a reason, but there's a lot of lack of critical thinking, which is like, I talk to, whether it's a rep or CEO, and they'll tell me about their approach, finding a new job, hiring, commercial strategy, and they'll say something, I'm like, that sounds a lot like what I've heard 5 other companies or 5 other people doing. Like, how do you think that's going to work out for you, that you're doing the exact same thing? Like,
Yeah,
what are you
exactly.
just going to do it better than them? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me know how that works.
Well, and the other thing is build. So this is where Intellis, we had to build a market from scratch. The market did not exist for office-based sinus procedures. So we were asking doctors to change 3 things: the site of service, okay, the anesthesia technique, and the tools they were using. So you try to change a tool is impossible, right? Now we're changing 3 things, and you have to build a market. You better shut up and listen to the market so that they can tell you what their fears are, what their pain is, and how you can help guide them through that. And that is a different skill set. And those that build markets are much more attuned to learning and are going to flourish more from a learning environment to grow. And so if you're going to introduce something new, like wherever I go to a new company. I'm not hiring everybody that I knew. I might hire one person or two, but everyone else is going to be different from a
Right.
different background. Because I just know that variety of thought and think and the diversity of backgrounds matters. And when I see companies, they say, whatever it is, they have to have 15 years in, whatever it is. It's like, well, you're blocking out an entire pool of talent that have probably accomplished great things that you're not even willing to have a conversation with. I think that's silly.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And part of it, I just feel like it's this outdated heuristic that people use from a commercial standpoint. The other part of it is just I just feel like it's lazy, because it is hard. Like hiring is hard. Anybody who says, "Oh, I'm great at hiring," is a liar. Nobody's good at hiring.
No.
It's very, very difficult. But part of that, like, and I really learned a lot about this from tech. When I went and worked for a software company, they had a very rigorous hiring process where not only it was who they spoke to, but like the questions they're asked, a presentation is done, all these different things, including the salespeople. In MedTech, a lot of times I feel like when we're evaluating salespeople, if they don't get brought in because so and so worked for them for the last 10 years, they get brought in and they get, oh, I love it. See, this is why we do this late night show, man. Earlier I had my baby, you got your dog, like
Yeah.
it's perfect.
Little Monty.
Yeah.
So,
No sweat. Sorry, I was distracted. This is a really beautiful dog, though. It's a very cool looking dog.
yeah.
But I feel like when they do start evaluating people for the commercial team, they put them through like all kinds of random interviews. Like they're gonna interview with an associate, the head of marketing, and everything, and everybody just kind of like has their own approach to interviewing, and it's like, oh, did you like them? Yeah, like yes or no. And there's not like any rigorous process.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's the reason why they default to let's just hire people we worked with?
Because it is hard. I told a CEO once, I said, if I had a blood test to find great salespeople, I'd be a billionaire.
Oh man, you know what? That's an idea, Jim.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is an idea.
But until then, we're doing the best that we can. And we put together at the companies I was at, we had a pretty good process of interviewing reps, interviewing other reps, managers from different areas, putting two people on the phone to interview, trying to figure out what this mix could be. And we had the same results everybody else did. Even though we kept trying and pivoting and doing different things. But it goes back to what's easier. And I'll tell you this, it's what's comfortable for people too. Because there's a lot of times that I will talk to even CEOs and giving my experience and my advice, I can tell that sometimes they're like, I don't know, this guy's too hard charging, has a lot of ideas and might come in here and be too much to deal with. I was talking to a company once and I was like, okay, you're going into the office, you're selling this product. I've sold to these specialty, and I know how they work, and I know what you need to do to sell into an office, and blah 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 blah. And then I asked, the question, I said, well, what's your revenue target for next year? And this is like November. This is like I don't know, 2 years ago, and so, or it was a year ago. And so, what's your revenue target? 20 million. I go, okay, so how many salespeople do you have? Well, we don't really have salespeople. We have like 3 people, but we're going to hire 20. And I go, okay, so it's November. You don't have a VP of sales, and you're going to hire 20 people. You won't get that done until sometime till April. And then you're going to expect them all to be able to drive 1+ million in 9 months. It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. And my wife at the end of it, she goes, well, how did that go? I go, yeah, he's not calling me back. So,
yeah, but it's just true. It's just so true. I mean, look, hopefully you can attend it, but you should go to, because it's a great conference. But LSI is having their annual MedTech Investor Summit again in the spring. I'll be speaking at it. But, sometimes I go listen to these pitches, and like the first thing the CEOs say, the first thing comes out of their mouth is like, hey, give us X amount of money. We're going to hire like 10 or 15 salespeople, and do what with them?
Yeah, exactly. So,
there's no formula correlation between X amount of sales people mean this much in
Yeah,
revenue. Not
yeah.
until you get like later on in your
No,
growth.
no, you're absolutely right. And so you've heard me talk about this, write about it. Commercialization as a process. So commercialization includes marketing, includes sales, but it also includes the clinical team. They call it
Hmm.
the regulatory team. You need to do write papers and studies. That's all part of the commercial process, but it's not considered as important as FDA clearance. And so we're going to hire a sales leader 90 days before, and we've already put a revenue plan together. I'm like, well, who besides your KOLs have you spoken to about this product and how easy or hard it is to get into the facility, what they're willing to pay for it, what due diligence have you done for the last year? Well, that's the sales guy's problem. I'm like, oh, okay. And like that. So when you're looking, going back to when you're looking at a startup, ask those questions. What have you done outside of talking to your KOLs? How much work have you put into it? Have you even tried your sales messaging and value propositions to see if it sticks with the working doctor in suburbia anywhere, right? Who is not affiliated with a large institution, who's not getting a big salary, but trying to create a practice, right?
Yeah,
Completely different conversation. And if you can
totally.
break that code, then you can break any code. But you need to, but the companies today are still thinking, like you said, it was 30 years ago, instead of thinking, I need to create a commercialization initiative that includes a holistic approach, working with all the departments in the company. Now, not everyone can lead it. Sales and marketing have to lead that conversation, and they have to get to that point, but bring people along, buy into this process, and you'll be much more successful because, like you said, I'm going to hire 10 reps, 20 reps. I'm going to train them on what somebody created a year ago. I'm going to send them out in the market, and I guarantee you, within 90 days, half the sales force is going to be checked out because they're like, "I'm getting the crap kicked out of me, and I'm learning all this stuff for the first time. I should have learned this in training to be prepared for it." So,
Oh, 100%. And I'm happy you mentioned that, Jim, because there's one thing that I feel like a lot of companies they don't take into account, which is sales. Whether you're selling a little $100 a month software product or $1 million robot, it's an emotions game. It's a psychological game. And so your sales team, I mean, it's a sport.
it is.
And so if they don't get a good win within a couple of quarters, that salesperson's done. It's really hard to get over that. And
Yeah.
so that doesn't mean they have to close a deal within a quarter because sometimes you don't have those sales cycles. But they have to have some kind of indication where they're like, yeah, you know what? This is hard, but like it makes sense to the market, right?
Yeah.
Like a perfect example at Potrero Medical, we had a critical care monitoring system that was, $17,000 compared to like a regular Foley catheter, which is $80 or something.
Right.
It's a hard sell. But like one of the things that kept me there, aside from like a great CEO and culture and everything, and the sales team, is that every doctor we talked to, not a single one said, "No, this doesn't make sense." Every single one of them said, "Man, this makes so much sense. This is going to make things so much better."
Yeah.
Right. I think like one suggestion I have, and I'm wondering if this happened to you. One mistake I've made in my career, I've made many mistakes,
Yeah.
but one of them that stands out is in my due diligence process of a company, I didn't go outside the company to validate what they're doing. Meaning that I didn't push hard enough to talk to some existing customers, and then I should have gone on my own because I know who they sell to, and find somebody who's this company sold to private practice surgeons in private practice. I should have gone and talked to some surgeons and be like, "Hey, I'm looking at this company. What do you think about this technology?"
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
100%, right? Because you have that opportunity, and it's really interesting because I know not very, very few people will do that, but those that do always have a level of success of getting to those doctors that you would never believe. And the reason is because one, it's different, and two, the doctors want to share their knowledge for somebody who's not really trying to sell them something, but looking for advice. So
Exactly. And look, you know, best platform to do it is LinkedIn. It is, people really underestimate how easy it is to get in touch with surgeons. I mean, even chairs of the department. We got a few comments I want to bring up real quick. Ken Houston says a high-powered sales organization is a lot different than a high-powered sales force. Totally agree with Jim. Absolutely can. And then we got some people that I want to highlight. So Tim Thompson coming in over from Phoenix, and I think there's a relation here. So Ariana Surik out of South Bend, Indiana.
There she
Of
is.
all things, is being a great daughter and saying, "I'm going to watch my dad live on LinkedIn tonight." Hey, is it Ariana or Ariana?
No, it's Ariana.
Ariana. Hey, Ariana, thanks for joining. So next thing I want to bring up, Jim. Let me bring up our banner here. This was an interesting one. So if you could kind of riff on this a bit, that what failure and success have in common at a startup.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so what it means, so let's start with what it means to go to a startup. It means that your entire life is going to be flipped upside down. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to go in with that type of attitude of what it means to go in is that it's going to be chaotic. It's going to be, major highs and major lows compared to what most sales professionals are used to. If you're working for one of the big strategics, don't take this wrong, but the hardest part of that job at one point was actually getting the job because that name on that card gets you in the door, right?
It's true. No offense to anybody, but
No.
sorry, it's just true.
I've taken over a $2 million territory as a new rep. Okay.
And you can bundle deals together.
Yeah, so now think of that comfort level, right? There's a comfort level to that. You go to a startup and you're like, "What's my territory?" The Northeast. It's like,
Yeah.
Go. Where do I start? Well, where do you think you should start? You'll get coaching and stuff like that, but there's the meaning of understanding. You're walking into a very unknown, unpredictable situation. Hopefully you have great leaders that keep everything calm. Because those are the ones in the times when things are going bad that keep everybody contained. And so, but you understand that your whole life is flipped upside down. I mean, I've talked to people going, "Well, who do I send my expenses to?" Yeah, you put them in, who do I do this? No, you do that, right? Everything is on you. You're an entrepreneur when you walk into a startup. It's a different way of thinking about entrepreneurism because going to a startup, you're going to get some stock, you're going to have a little bit of equity, and you're building something from scratch. It's not your money. You didn't come up with the idea, but you're playing a little bit of that entrepreneur. So have that mindset when you go into it. And so from that, your question, what does failure and success have in common at a startup? You're going to get your MBA at a startup in med device commercialization because we're talking to salespeople. You're going to get your MBA. You are going to learn things you would never learn if you had that $2 million territory at a big strategic company. You're just never going to learn this stuff. You will enter into an arena where politics is put at the door. In most cases. I mean, you're still going to have politics if you have two people in a room, but a lot of it goes away. So when you think about that MBA, even if that startup fails, it never gets anywhere. You have just earned your MBA in med device. And if you're successful in a startup, you obviously get that great feeling of what you've done. But you have an MBA plus working your way to a PhD because you realize what worked. And so if you just think about it from that perspective, even if it fails, I'm telling you, you're going to learn more there than anywhere else.
No, I totally agree, and it's really sound advice because, again, from a commercial standpoint, when people leave, again, no offense, like I have plenty of friends who are at Medtronic or Striking and everything. That's a whole different type of business,
sure,
right? But when you come into the startup world, at least from the commercial side, you're doing everything. Right, including your own market research. Like you don't have all these fancy tools, and I think that's the other thing is like at least from one of the lessons that I saw from the SaaS world is how industrious the sales team is. Right, and there is actually I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball here, Jim, but I think you can roll with it
sure.
with me for a second. So I'm going to show for a second. There's a venture capital firm called Stage 2 Capital. So it's the first VC firm that was started by SaaS sales and marketing people or execs. One of the partners there is Mark Robert. Some of the people might recognize that name. That's the guy who was the first chief revenue officer of HubSpot. And he published the book Sales Acceleration Formula, great book. So he shared this document with me like many years ago, and I'm wondering, like, your take on this real quick, Jim. And again, bear with me. Let's see. Here we go, Jim. Let me know when you can see the screen. It should be a white paper.
Yeah. Let me see if I can make it bigger. There we go.
Oh, and actually, hold on. Yep. There we go. I just gave everybody a headache. So this is a go-to-market strategy for SaaS companies that they've gone through in their firm. And if we take a look over here on the pink side where it says product market fit, obviously things are not surprising. Is your main goal is just to retain the customer's utilization, target market is early adopter, but the sales hire is somebody who's a combo of a product manager and an account executive. Okay. And let me come back now, back over to you. The reason why I bring that up, and I'm wondering your thoughts on this, is that early stage startups who hire salespeople who are product managers in the sense that when they sell, they're focused on how do I make sure this customer uses this thing, how much they like it. I'm going to give feedback to the product team. At the same time, functions almost like an account executive where even after they sell, they're calling and checking back in like, hey, are you happy with the product? How are things going, et cetera? And then use that customer to leverage them to open up more markets. Is that the right way to think about it? Would you agree with that?
Yeah. So from a startup perspective, it's exactly that. Like what I was talking about is you've got to start this commercialization process 12 months before you're really going to launch. Even if you get FDA approval, that doesn't mean you should just start selling that day. So what you have with those and those sales reps in the beginning are exactly that. They're when we call them product managers, we're calling them clinical experts, right? They know that product. They can do that procedure. If they were in the middle of a war and somebody said, hey, come and do this, they should be able to do it. So they know everything about it. And so, but then at the same time, they're acting as that sales rep, an account executive. And I can point this out because at Intellis, when we hired our first 20 reps, when I got there were 4 or 5 of them that really dove deep into understanding the practice and how to sell to an office, what the flow was, and they figured it out on their own because they went deep. The clinical knowledge was there, and then you could see them expanding, and then we pulled them in for a day and a half meeting to go, tell us exactly what you're doing, and it's exactly what you're describing. They were product experts, clinical experts, right? But then they were business people at the same time, understanding the doctor's practice, understanding what was important to them and what mattered. And we took that information, and that's what actually drove Intellis, to become the market leader in the office-based procedures, is because of that type of skill set that you're pointing out. And it's really interesting because when you start there as a rep and as the company grows and becomes acquired, those reps don't flourish anymore.
Right. Because now they have to focus on one little area.
And they want that excitement, that adrenaline. They want to build something. So 2 different types. It's just like when you're bringing a product to market. Your early adopters and then your majority. It's a different commercialization process.
Yeah, you know what? I wonder, you kind of just hit on something I never thought of, but there's probably just like how you have the technology adoption curve, there's probably a sales adoption curve in terms of like when your company's at the very beginning, you're going to attract like a certain type of salesperson. But as you start growing up market, your sales team is probably going to have to change.
It has to.
I mean, even me, like, look, I mean, I'm pretty confident in my marketing abilities, but there's a certain point where the company's at a certain size and doing a certain number of things. I'm like, it's not a fit for me, and I'm not a fit for them.
Yeah, and that's okay. So interesting. So, in my career at all these companies, we have to let people go for non-performance, right? A good percent of them end up winning President's Club at their next companies, right? Well, why, right? It just wasn't a fit. And that's not a personal thing. This just wasn't your game. this wasn't for you, and you found something that was, and then you latched onto it, and you excelled. And I've seen that so many different times. So, and that's okay, and it's okay to do something. Oh God, this is not for me, right?
Yeah. No, no, absolutely.
So Omar, I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
When you talked about Potrero, and then you guys went out, and doctors were saying, "Wow, this makes all the sense in the world." Well, how did you get to that point for the doctors to say that? What did you guys do so that when you got to talk to them, they were like, "Yeah, this is right."
Yeah. So, well, fortunately, we had a good product. That helps. But I think the other side of it was, I would say that was really the place where I took all the sales and marketing mentorship and learning and training that I've been doing it, and I had like a company to just focus that on. I think the main thing was that we really focused on owning and understanding the problem, like really, really well. And that problem was acute kidney injury.
Hmm.
That's what we led with. I had a strong belief in if you get very good at owning the problem, giving it a name, explaining the problem, you own the solution as a result of it versus
Yeah.
the other way around. And so when we went and talked to physicians, because we were able to demonstrate ownership of the problem, it made it easier to explain what the solution to that
Yeah.
problem is. You know?
Yeah. So you weren't going out asking stupid questions, right?
No, no,
Tell me about
definitely
the
not.
challenges that you have with acute kidney injury,
Yeah,
right? It's like,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And I'll tell you, and I think for some of those who are like early intuitive class, will appreciate this. I being mentored by a guy like Chris Sells, and Ken Houston's another name that has taught me the same with Tim Morowski, which is, when you only have so many words to say, you have to pick the right words. So you don't just ask questions. Like every salesperson's taught, like, oh, just you ask questions and everything. Well, you have to ask the right questions,
Yeah. That's
right?
right.
You know, and I think that was the part. We asked the right questions of the market. We asked the right questions of ourselves. So when we started, we originally were marketing it hard to nephrologists because they deal a lot with acute kidney injury.
Right.
But then we had to ask some hard questions. We're like, okay, in reality, is this a person who's going to fight for the technology to get into the hospital? Probably not, because no offense to them, they're getting acute kidney injury later on in the
That's right.
patient's care cycle.
That's
And
right.
at that point, yeah, what the damage is done. And then this is no offense, this is not every nephrologist. So for the nephrologists listening, this is not every nephrologist, but the majority of nephrologists, they're not the personality type to go walk into the CEO's office and be like, hey, we need to sit down and have a talk about getting this piece of technology. It just doesn't happen that way.
Right.
So we had to change who we went after. But I think marking the problem and owning it really helps a lot. And then understanding like the limitations of the product. It's not for everybody.
See, now it's really funny you say that because I just had a conversation in which I was involved with something where we changed the messaging, and part of the messaging was this doesn't necessarily going to work every time because of patient anatomy, patient previous surgeries, because of certain things, and admitting that up front to a doctor, saying it's going to work most of the time, but you have these different value areas, but this one value prop that we have is going to be limited based on patient anatomy and previous surgeries and scar tissue. And as soon as you start doing that, your credibility goes up so high, because
But
you're just going, this is what it is. I'm not going to promise something that's not.
absolutely. And you know what I love about that? Again, like persuasion is one of my favorite topics. It's a very persuasive thing because when you give a negative, right, it makes the message a lot more believable versus if you do not, the person who's receiving the message, their brain is going to try and come up with a negative on its own. It's just
That's
a very
right.
natural process.
That's
Even with
exactly
my own
right.
program, like what I love about what I do right now is that I get to do all the selling. Right now, I can't do all the selling anymore. I have to hire people for that. But what I love is the moment I start talking about my program. I mean, even I think when I talked to you about it, Jim, I was like, look, this is not for everybody, and then this doesn't work for every single person you're selling to in the
Sure.
hospital, right?
Yeah.
Nothing's ever like that.
Yeah. Well, that's it's different skill sets. All you're doing is grabbing onto another skill set that you can use in the chosen place that you should use it. So with Protero though, when you guys went out there and you're having these conversations, you're having direct conversations based on the information that you understand to be true, and you're engaging in thought and concept. You're not engaging in question based selling. but in thought and concept, almost that challenger model to that point, so that the doctor, if they're saying, "Wow, this makes complete sense," then you know the market, right? You knew the market before. Well, when you went out there and started doing this, you knew it, and that's what is successful. If you're
Exactly.
not getting that at your companies, if you're like, "Why am I selling this? Why is it any better?" You need to go back to your marketing team, your engineering team, as an individual. I don't care if you work for one of the big strategics or mid-sized company. You have a right to go and tell me why this is better clinically, financially, and from a strategic standpoint for the patient doc practice healthcare system. Help me understand that. And then if you have to build your own value-based propositions and talk track, do it. But if you find yourself where you can't have an engaging conversation, you're in trouble.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. And part of that, and I'm actually looking on your LinkedIn. I want to find I think I found it. There's a post I want to bring up um about stop calling sales in medtech. So I do want to bring that up if you don't mind.
That's fine.
Yeah, and talk about it because I did like it. But no, yeah, I think I lost my train of thought. See, this is the problem when you have a newborn baby. Like
Well,
I'm not.
you were bringing up my post on this isn't stop calling medtech sales.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey guys, like it's not a perfect show. This is the after hour show.
All right.
You know.
This is real.
Yeah, this is real. This is as real as it gets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me bring up this post. I'll read it out loud, for people who are listening to this on the podcast later on. They can't see it. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So here's the post. So let me read this out for people. So we need to stop calling sales in medtech, and stop listening to those with opinions on sales who never carried the bag nor worked for a medtech company. Please, it's embarrassing. I love it. It is commercialization. Sales joined at the hip with marketing is the start. Creating value rapport with the marketplace based on clinical, financial, and strategic value to the multi-headed customer is just the beginning. Sales reps, you need to become experts at social rapport and value creation in your space. No, not asking for an invite on LinkedIn and then asking for a meeting. That dog doesn't hunt. Commercialization is a company alignment that enhances value understanding throughout the company and onto multiple platforms, such as LinkedIn. This necessitates a strong cultural alignment around the cultural needs, not the product features, from all company functions. Sales reps should not be told just to build rapport and sell on social media. That's laziness at its finest. By the way, I 100% agree. Commercialization equips reps to use value-based data, information, market trends, and insights into their specialty to demonstrate specialty expertise. The reps use the value-based insights to build trust, not brand. It's not about your personal brand. This isn't the Kardashian platform. It's about your passion to elevate patient care efficiency in healthcare. The evolution is happening, and I'm jacked up all about it. Think of commercialization just as you would becoming an expert at building any value. Commercialization never ends. It's an ongoing process. So, that being said, please riff on that.
You want me to riff on that? Like,
Yeah.
why I wrote that?
Yeah, I'd love to hear what made you write that. I have
Yeah.
I have an idea why, not
Yeah.
specific one, but like I have an idea. It's probably the same thing that gets under my skin. But yeah, I just want to hear like your thoughts on that.
Well, a lot of it. So there's a lot in there, right? And so when we start talking about sales, it goes back to it's the sales guy's problem or gal's problem who's going to head sales. It's not. It's a company process and initiative. That's why it needs to be called commercialization.
Mm-hmm.
And my perception and what I've done, so the process that I've shared um, in that post is a process that I use when I go to my companies, right? I'm going to strategically align with marketing first. Let's talk about the product. Why do you believe in this product? Why did you come over here? What do you think it can do? How does it do it better than anyone else? What is the clinical advantage, the financial and strategic advantage to the multi-headed customer? So you get that information, and then I'm walking down to R&D. We're going to have that same conversation with R&D. Then I'm going over and I'm going to talk to the CFO. Tell me why you think this product's great. You do that throughout the entire company. right? And you
Hmm.
get people thinking and they're sharing, and then you present these ideas back, and you're going to see connection and disconnect. And then you got to sort out why there's that disconnect, even internally, because if internally you're not bought in to the commercialization as an initiative and as a process, then it's just going to be finger pointing when you go and launch that product if it's not working. So get everybody on the same page. And the reason I share that is that I see people write stuff about sales who've never even been in sales and who've never
In
even
our
been
industry or in general?
in our industry, and they've never even worked for a MedTech company. And let me tell you what sales in MedTech is going to be. Well, you've never even held a bag. You go grab a bag, go build a territory, then come back and talk to me. Don't talk from your high chair and tell me, right, how everything that I think and have done is a complete mistake and it's all dead, because that's not how we should look at our past experiences. We are an accumulation of our life experiences. Now, am I going to do what I did in 1995? No, right? Because it's evolved from there, and it's evolved through true life experiences, and then we're going to build on it. So listen to those who've actually done it, right? Listen and like with your course, even with Matthew Ray Scott, what he's doing, right? People are giving you skill sets and giving you information and trying to help you become a better professional in our space. And you could tell I'm incredibly passionate about our space because we're changing people's lives. Our healthcare system is broken, and we're part of the opportunity to fix it and make it better by bringing great products to market. So it's not a personal thing. It's just don't tell people what to do that if you've never done it, especially in med tech. And when it comes to the branding piece, I don't want to. I I'm not interested in, you know, where you're going to dinner tonight. I'm not interested, and that's a personal thing on my part. Where it rubs me the wrong way because I go to LinkedIn because I want to learn something, right? I want to get value out of that. I put some personal stuff out every once in a while, so I'll do that too. But it's not all the time, you know.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's okay to do it. I know, Omar, you share some things, but it's here and there, and so I want people to pay attention to those that have a track record and have done it and are trying to help teach you something, not tell you how you're broken.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I mean, I like what you said is that, you're an accumulation of your life experiences. You know, if you look at medicine as a culture, right, and part of that is like medical sales people, you're not going to erase a certain type of culture that has existed, if not just 10 years, for the last like millennia even, right? Or
Yeah,
50 years, right? And so for me, even like as much as I'm a big fan of digital and using these virtual channels, you don't get rid of the old way, right? You have to just take the old way and adapt it to new
that's right.
channels, right? So for example, like I'm some people have a problem that I still believe in this, but I'm a big proponent of reps developing that strong relationship with a surgeon so that they are like true trusted clinical advisors.
100%.
And I think it's great. Like there's certain reps that they've done a good job with their LinkedIn. They've developed good relationships with surgeons, and those surgeons will come to me, and not come to me, come to them and ask them, hey, like, what do you think about this new technology? Do you think I should adopt this? I think those things are good, right? I don't think that you should do away with those things. For example, if you're a rep and you've developed like one of the reps who's in my course, he's developed such a good relationship with a surgeon that his surgeon, he and his surgeon, they go like they train together. I think they go running and stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. I think if you've done such a good job in your business that you're so trusted in everything that somebody wants to spend their personal time with you, I think that's a positive thing, right?
Absolutely. Now, the thing is to keep in mind, you don't have a relationship until you provide value,
Bingo, exactly.
right?
You cannot, exactly. Do not go and try and be friends with somebody just because you got a great personality. Hey, that might be true, but especially at a certain point after, I don't know, the age of 25, nobody gives a shit about like how fun or cool you are.
Right.
Everything. It's like if you look at all my friends, just coincidentally, all of them provide some kind of value to me,
Sure.
business or personally. It just so happens they happen to be fun people, but like
Sure.
if there's no value there, it's just like I'm wasting my time.
Well, yeah, exactly. And so that's the one thing. So taking that back, so when I started 30 years ago, people would say, just go build a relationship and then you'll sell something. And there is a big belief because
There's some truth to that.
There is
There's
some
some truth, but you can't rely on
no, no, no.
that.
So, but here's the point though. Those people started in the 80s,
Yeah.
okay? And that was way, way different. Go talk to some old school US surgical folks and they'll tell you, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so that was brought into the 90s, right? Saying just build relationships. Well, things started to change. And you still could do that, but once you started to provide value, then you became friends and friendly. And then I know a lot of people that were in weddings, doctors, they were part of the groomsmen, you know, that's how close they were. Going on vacations with their families, that's perfectly fine. I think it's incredible, but you have to earn that,
Absolutely,
right?
100%.
Right?
You have to earn it. And look, just like a small like sidebar example, because it's one of my favorites. Many people who know who or they've heard of Ira Kirschenbaum. He's the chair of orthopedic surgery over at Bronx Care. Okay, this guy's like I suppose allegedly nicknamed the Godfather in ortho because he's from New York. He's got that swagger to him.
Sure.
And he's very well respected among orthopedic surgeons. A year ago, I tried to get that guy on my podcast. Do you know what the answer was? Not interested. Like
Yeah.
just flat out.
Yeah.
Usually I'm able to get people on. I mean, I get like VCs on, investors.
Yeah.
This surgeon couldn't do it. But then after a few months, he saw my content. I'd engaged with him a little bit, and then some, I think a couple of orthopedic surgeons had tagged me in a couple of posts saying, oh, you should talk to Omar. That's when he came back to me and said, hey, when are we going to finally chat? I'm like, dude, I've been trying to chat with you for like the last year. And now we have a very good friendship and relationship. Why? Does he find me like fun and he has a good time when we catch up like every other Saturday we Zoom together? Absolutely. But you know what's underneath all that? I provide just a tremendous amount of value to him. Because I talked to him about his journal, I talked about him what he's doing like with the orthopedic community and everything. We help each other, but our friendship is based on value that's being
Yes.
exchanged, not just, oh, I'm a fun guy, he's a fun guy.
Yeah, yeah. Nobody has time for that. So you've got to provide that value. You have to. And that's why going back to that post, if people truly want to be respected as a subject matter expert, you have to prove that. Right? You don't have to prove to me that you're a good family man or woman. I'm going to assume that, right? And I just want to know what you know. What can you tell me that's going to help me become a better professional? I've been doing this for 30 years. I am still in search for the answers, right?
Yeah, totally. And I
And
think some of the personal posts are okay every now and then. It's good for the algorithm, by the way.
I get it.
Like I hate the fact that like I'll kill myself writing a really deep like analysis on like when Amazon acquired One Medical, it got like I don't know,
Yeah.
30 or 40 or 50 likes or something. I post a picture of me in Halloween costumes, like 300 likes. I'm like, God damn it! Like you just like what the guys shit. I don't know who to be pissed off. I don't know if to be pissed off at the algorithm, my audience, or both.
Right. So this is a true story. It was about 2 or 3 years ago. My youngest daughter, was in an accident, and the hurricane was coming up into Florida. It was like going to be the biggest hurricane to cover the. And it was still a big hurricane, but it didn't do much damage. But anyways, my daughter was fine. Her cousin was in the car with her. She was fine. The car was totaled. And so my wife and I decided that we were going to drive down to Florida, go to the western side, and we had to get another car for her. So we were driving it down, and we were going to fly back. And so we stopped in Panama City for the night, and for a couple days. And so, anyways, I texted something, or not texted, posted on LinkedIn. Hey, we all think we have troubles, and this devastated Puerto Rico. Okay, so Puerto Rico, we all think we have problems, right? My daughter was in an accident and she's alive. Everything's fine. We're getting a new car. But the people in Puerto Rico are who we need to be worried about. The people in the Caribbean are the things that we have to think about. The problems that you have are probably so minor when it compared to the world. Just take a step back and just be happy, to be with your loved ones. 85,000 views.
Wow.
Eighty-five thousand.
That's a lot. That's a
I
big
mean,
post.
I mean, I'm looking at this going, who's reading this? But so it does have that value. It you do it when you can, but I'm not really interested in the clothes you're wearing and what you're going to eat, and you know,
Yeah.
so
But I will say like on a couple things. So like sometimes on the weekends I'll put something. I'm very much into like personal development and everything. So I try and put that stuff on there. Not gonna lie, it is also for the algorithm. On the other side though, for people who are just starting on LinkedIn, right, and creating content, sometimes people get down like when they get like 5 or 10 likes and there's only 100 impressions. But you have no idea who's within those 100 impressions. Because for me, when I started out early on, I felt the same way. But I was like, you know what? I don't care. I just need like one person I care about to see this. And a lot of those people, like some of my lowest performing articles back in the day, they were read by some of the most powerful people in this industry. Like specifically, like look, Scott, I released my episode with Scott Hunnekens. He was following some of my stuff,
yeah,
so I think that's the one thing that people should keep in mind. And I want to go back to a comment you made about, having the experience, which I completely wholeheartedly agree with. On one side, if let's say you're a new rep, you're an associate, it's like, well, what do I know? You can find something that you can learn and just be better at somebody. Like something simple as like, hey doc, let me give you some tips on like what you should do to just improve your LinkedIn profile. Or, hey, I know you're doing this patient seminar. I did some research, pulled some best practices. Like, here's actually a good way to market it and like do it on this day. Like little things like that, like early in your career is what elevates you. And then later on, there's always going to be somebody who has like, if not more experience, they came from a fancier college, better company or anything. You have to just come to terms with that and then find a way to compensate for it. I'll just use myself as an example. I think I'm pretty good at sales, but have I carried the bag for over 10 years? Absolutely not. And I even tell people there's certain things that I have zero experience talking about and I have no business to. I try and bring my own perspective and say, this is where I think like persuasion is my thing. Where I can't, that's why I have people like you on, right? Because if I'm able to validate the message through somebody like you, then it means something. Versus people just try and do it all by themselves. Like you're just not going to get anywhere.
yeah.
You
No,
know?
it's true. No, it's true. And like the advice that you were giving on providing value, the only, and I wrote something about this too, is that there's only a top 3 to 5% of the reps will actually do that. And they'll go to a doctor, they'll go to an office, they'll go to a practice, and they'll go, what? Take the products I'm selling out, right? Just pretend I'm not the representative for this company. What are you thinking about right now when it comes to your practice and your patient?
Oh, that's a good question.
Right?
Yeah.
And just see, because if they come up with something where it's a marketing issue, it's this issue, and then let's say it's marketing my practice. Well, you can call Trackable Leads. You can call Matthew Ray Scott. Oh, let me introduce you to somebody that might be able
Oh,
to help
Trackable
you.
Med. Yeah, yeah.
Trackable
Yes.
Med.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's other ways of going about that. So
Absolutely. No, and Jim, that's such a great point because this is where I feel, and Dr. Vinod Dasa talks about this, which is the rep being a trusted advisor. There's like literally nothing stopping you from saying, you know what, like going and asking a question like that, and then based on what they say, let's say I'll give you the most common answer to that. It's either marketing the practice or getting paid,
Yeah.
aka medical billing and revenue cycle management. Nothing is stopping you as a rep to say, okay, that's what they're having a problem with. I'm gonna go find somebody who does really good marketing. So like Trackable Meta would be another one. Matthew Ray Scott would be another one. I'm gonna reach out to them and say, hey, I might have a practice you can help. I might have more business for you. Can I get on a call, or do you have any materials you can send me just so I can educate myself?
Yep.
So you have a baseline. Same thing with revenue cycle management. When I worked at Gentem, which is a rev cycle management company, I would tell reps, I'm like, look, here's some basic materials on rev cycle management that you can go talk to an office and say, hey, make these changes, you'll make more money, like
Right.
immediately.
right.
I think 2 of them listened to me. And they
Yeah.
came back and they're like, dude, this office loves me. I'm like, yeah, because you help them make more money.
Exactly.
Now, how much easier is it to say, hey, look, can we just talk about the product that I sell?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's just creative thinking. Mike McIntyre, he worked for me at Advanced Bionics and at Intellis. And by the time we got to Intellis, he goes, you know what? We have to hire creative reps. We have to interview for creativity because we're building a market. We're doing something different. We don't have the answers, so we need people who know how to get the answers. and they need to be creative. I was like, that's brilliant, right? And so what you're talking about is the same thing. Be creative in ways that are outside your product, so to build value with those doctors. And like you said, the rep needs to be that, clinical expert, that product expert that the doctors want. There's nothing more fulfilling as a device rep to have doctors lean on you and have these really in-depth conversations clinically, and looking at you for that answer. But that took years to get there,
Yeah,
right?
that's
And it
right.
doesn't happen
And a lot
overnight.
of hard work.
Yeah, and
Like,
you've got do all
oh, sorry,
these
sorry. Go
little
ahead.
things. No, do all these little things because they all add up to something big in the end,
A hundred
right?
percent. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, and it does take time, but it takes persistence.
Yeah.
And we Jim, you and I, I know we're a little over the hour, so start wrapping it
Sure.
up. But I love that. Yeah, because it's late. Because it's 6 o'clock here. It's late other places. But we still have like a lot of people who are on actually. Like, I think we've only lost like 10% of people. So we're doing
All
something
right.
right. Yeah, love it. So, and by the way, I know because I was wondering. I was like, there's all these people on, but they're not commenting. I think a lot of them are reps who are driving and they're just got this. They're just listening to this on the drive. So please do not comment while you're driving. I have to like tell people this all the time. So I'm like, I don't want a liability.
Sure.
you know.
Yeah.
But the last thing I wanted to kind of like mention and hear from you is like just in wrapping up, what are your like biggest pieces of advice just in terms of Q4? For reps who are out there trying to close deals, and or people who are going to start at a new company in Q1. Like,
Okay.
what are your biggest commercial takeaways? Sorry, that's
Yeah.
kind of a big, broad question,
Yeah.
but
So
you know,
this is what I would say. If you're struggling in Q4, it's because you weren't doing the right things 3-4 months ago.
oh, the truth, the truth hurts, but it'll set you free.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I mean, because whatever you're selling today, you were working on 6 months ago, right? So if you're not making it, you were doing the wrong thing 6 months ago, and or focused on activities that didn't matter. So if you're in that situation, now you have to think back of what you were doing versus what you should have been doing. Um, for reps that are looking for a new gig going into next year, the advice is make sure you're making the decision for the right reasons. I get a lot of phone calls from reps who are looking. I'm looking to make a change. Why are you looking to make a change?
Mm,
Right? And okay, is it going to be better at that company than where you're at? It's the same product, same industry. You're just competing against yourself, I guess. So be very thoughtful when you're making these career changes, and going into it for the right reasons. And there's other pieces when, like, I've never gone into marketing. I've never moved to go to the corporate office. That's just a personal um, decision I made to keep my family, my kids close to their, great aunts and uncles and great grandparents and cousins. My daughters, they know their third cousins, once removed. So, but if you really want to be that executive and you really want to grow that career, you're going to have to make decisions about moving to the corporate office, taking on a marketing role, a product management role. You're going to have to make those decisions. So don't go to a company because you have intent.
yeah, that's such a good point. Is having intent behind the decisions we make, and I think that goes beyond just like title and salary.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
It's, somebody's like, well, I'm going to get 10 grand more, great. That's what, $800 a month.
yeah.
It's like,
Well,
what's that going to do?
even if it's, I mean, I'll I won't mention his name. There's a very talented young MedTech marketer who is going to get a lot of money in this next gig. And I looked at the company and I told him, I almost said his name. And I told him, I said, hey man, look, I know that you'll get paid a lot of money, but what do you give up to go work for this company? And how much of what makes you do you have to burn off to work for this company? He didn't end up going work for the company, thank God. But I think you're so right about that, which is the intent. I think people get immediately, hypnotized by company, title, salary, and they forget about the intent that they have
Yeah.
for their career.
Yeah. So
You
just
know?
keep that in mind. You know, manage your career, as seriously as you would your health, you know. And so, um, jumping around isn't good for you.
100%. 100%. Um, all right, we got one. Can you take one last question?
Sure.
Okay, because we got one. So I gotta bring this one up. So our boy Joe Canepa. Can we talk more about market? We can't talk more about it, Joe, because like it's late for Jim and I, and we like we're running on fumes here. But we'll do our best to answer. So, can someone with less than 2 years sales experience get in a startup marketing role? Jim?
Yeah, I think you can. But you're going to have to do your homework. You're going to have to follow companies that you're interested in, the products that they're selling, have a passion for it, and connect on LinkedIn. And you need to start putting out content that's meaningful to show that you're serious and you become a subject matter expert so that people take you seriously, right? It's not just, oh, look, I have 2 years experience. I want to be a marketer. I don't, I want to know what you know, right? I want to
Mm-hmm.
see that you care. So in today's world, 10 years ago, you couldn't even really do that. Now you can. And so, if you're serious and that's what you want to do, then get serious about becoming somebody who's providing valuable content on LinkedIn.
I think it's such 100%. This is exactly the same advice I would give Jim. And Joe, what I would tell you is like, and now I had to learn this. And again, so Jim, you've hired 10 times more people than I have. So you tell me if I'm wrong here. When you have very little experience, nobody's going to hire you for your experience because there's very little of it. What somebody's going to hire you for is for potential, right?
Yeah,
When you go to a big company, they're hiring you based on exactly what's this person's experience and everything. When you go to a startup, you do have to have experience, but a lot of times you get hired for potential, who they can see you becoming.
yeah, that's exactly right.
And you can't formulate that idea at the interview. They have to see that well before the interview through their interactions with you. If you get them on the phone, maybe possibly on LinkedIn, so they can see something and say, you know what, I hire this guy. I can see who he can become for us
Yeah,
1 year from now, 2 years from now, etc.
yeah.
You
And
know,
and you're gonna by being on LinkedIn and creating that value, you can have a conversation around it, right? Versus just your resume. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? This is how I perceive things. I wrote an article. I wrote this. It gives you a deeper personality. They're going to see a deepness in you that they won't in others. So
100%. Don't wait for the interview to impress people.
yes, yes,
Look, Jim and I did not coordinate this before this interview, but what he just described is literally exactly what I did back in 2014, which is, you know, develop the relationships, write articles, show my potential, and that whole process, which took me, I think, 9 months, I just grinded, paved my way from Orlando, Florida, to San Francisco, and I had this amazing career in Silicon Valley for the next 4 or 5 years. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
so that's where it starts.
That's right.
Jim, I can't thank you enough for staying up late and jumping on. Stay on for just a second so we
Sure.
can just chat real quick. Everybody, this has been another episode of Medical Sales Live on the Medical Sales Network Effects program. So I'm your host, Omar Khateeb. If you're listening to this, you're probably listening to this on the State of MedTech. So if you are, be sure to just take 1 second, hit that 5-star button, give us 5 stars, write a quick review. We are climbing the charts, my friends. We're going to be in the top 10 by the end of the year, okay?
All right.
But I need your work. I need your help. So make sure to do it. All right, everybody, take care. Enjoy yourselves.